All right, put your hands together. You're all that's everlasting. It's an everlasting love. Your mercy is as new as every rising of the sun. And your loving kindness better than life. Grace is all sufficient. It's an all sufficient grace. Your power and your glory are forever on display. And your loving kindness better than life. Oh, it's better. Oh, better than life. Oh, so much better. Spirit, your loving kindness is better than life. All right now. Let's bring it. There is up 10,000 you are fair. And nothing in this world could ever measure or compare to your loving kindness better than life. All your ways are just, oh Lord, you're just in all your ways. And I will lift my hands, oh Lord, with gratitude and praise for your loving kindness better than life. Oh, it's better. Oh, better than life. Oh, so much better. Spirit, your loving kindness is better than life.
Good morning. I want to welcome all of you here as we move together through our spiritual and personal self-discovery and growth. My name is Cheryl, and it's going to be so much fun to spend this morning Thanksgiving and then eating good food. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Your loving kindness better than life itself. It's better than life. Bring it on. Oh, it's better. Oh, better than life. Oh, so much better. Spirit, your loving kindness. Oh, it's better. Oh, better than life. Oh, so much better. Spirit, your loving kindness better than life. Much better. So much better. So much better. Better than life. So much better. So much better.
Better than life.
You got another one coming? All right.
Don't play with my sound.
some announcements, things going on. We'll keep it short. But I want to give special appreciation to Irina and Stephanie, who came in this week and spiffed the place up. They cleaned it up. And then last night we had choir rehearsal, and Larry and Joseph have helped us out with redecorating. The choir put the tables in place. Larry and Joseph furnished the decorations, and I think it looks lovely. Thank you so much.
Y'all look lovely.
On Wednesday evenings, we continue with our Candidly Speaking series, where sort of like group therapy with Reverend Kandace. Ask any question in the world, and she will come up with an answer that will amaze you. It's a low-key question and answer session. I see, do we have anyone here for the first time today? Okay, good.
You're lucky.
We have 3, 4, 5. Here.
They can
Okay.
come up and sing?
If you keep your hand up, Candace has a little bit of information for you. Okay, go. There you go. We have one right up here, Candace, and over there. Okay. And again, welcome so much. This is a place where we
Going one more time.
pursue our spiritual path, honoring all churches and centers of worship throughout the world. And we integrate everything. Welcome, welcome. If you have a plastic name tag on, that means you're a member of the center. And what that means to people who don't have a plastic name tag, there's a good chance you can ask these people questions that you might have about the center or about Science of Mind, and they'll be able to give you a reasonable answer or find somebody that can. And we have, in addition to our regular tithing, we have a project that we call our Coffee Can Project. And with our Spirit Change, we do little things around, like get our new sign, got new countertops. We're working on signage to put out on Sundays to help direct more people. So, I'll go ahead and put in my 2 cents.
I'm going to talk a little bit today about the idea of blessings. And I can sum it up real quick and very briefly, and then we can all go back and eat that wonderful food that I smell all over the place. But now, actually, this is what I think it all comes down to. That there is only one blessing, and that blessing is God's Spirit's love. And it is given fully and freely to all of us all the time, because God, Spirit, infinite mind, knows only to give of itself. And since we're extensions of God consciousness, we're emanations of God, then God is just continuously, constantly blessing us all the time. And it sounds great, doesn't it? So what's the problem? What's the problem? Well, the problem is I don't get it. The problem is I'm not receiving it. The problem is I don't believe it. The problem is sometimes I'm not open to it. So what I have to do, what I recognize is that I have to change my thinking from the world that I live in, and the thinking of the world basically says, you're bad, you're wrong, you're awful, you're a sinner, and all that kind of stuff. Which is not what we subscribe to in the Science of Mind at all, but we'll get to that a little later. And what I have to do is say, okay, if God made me, God doesn't make any junk. And it's the nature of God to give of God's self to each of us. Now, I know you've all heard the notion of, and I don't even like the word, that people are sinners. Now, first let me say, Jesus never calls anyone a sinner in the Bible. I've looked, it's not there. Now, he does say, go and sin no more. Which I think, first of all, well, sin means that you've missed the mark. It's actually an old archery term that when the arrow would slide through the dirt and not hit the target, it would make this kind of sound like zoom. And that meant, well, you've sinned. You've missed the target. You've missed the mark. So the story that I really like about this, it's the story of the woman in the Bible who was taken in adultery. And they're getting ready to stone her because that was a stonable offense. And so Jesus is there. And Jesus bends down and he draws a line in the sand and he writes down a word and he says, "Let he who is among you without sin cast the first stone." And the crowd just kind of like disperses, you know, like, I'm out of here. You know? Oh, and so he says to the woman, "Where are your accusers now?" And she says, "They're not here." And he says, "Neither do I condemn you, so go and sin no more." In other words, he recognizes that this is really a very teachable moment. You've missed the mark. You were off track. You did not hit the target, but you are not a sinner. You are an original blessing. So this whole notion that we come into this life in sin, I completely disagree with that. I think that's nonsense. I think that notion was created to hold people back, to hold them down, to keep them small. I mean, just imagine if from the time that you were born, we believed that we were an original blessing, that we came here, our energy, our spirit, our soul incarnated so that we could be a blessing into the world that we live in. I think, wow, that's really a concept I can get behind. To not embrace who you are as a unique, precious, valuable child of God is simply an error. You've missed the mark. If you believe or have believed up until now something else about yourself, well, this is the teachable moment, I hope. And I hope right now you will choose to think something different, to believe something different. See, it can be corrected right now. No matter how long you've believed in error, an error anywhere in your life, it can be changed right now. This is one of the extraordinary things I think about our teaching. If you can actually have believed in sickness for decades, but in a moment, you can change your thinking about that. You can have believed in lack for decades, but in a moment, you can change your thinking about that. You can have believed, I'm bad, I'm not much, I'm a sinner. You can have believed that for as long as you've believed that. But in a moment, it can change. And you can say, but wait, that's not the truth that God created, Spirit created. Spirit and God created each one of us as emanations of love. That is who and what we are as spiritual beings. We are emanations of love. And so to believe that you are not enough, to believe that you're not good enough, to believe that you are somehow defective, is to blaspheme God. God, Spirit, made you. So to believe that there's more God someplace else, I think also that blasphemes God. Now, it's only here in this church on a pre-Thanksgiving day that you will hear the minister quote Janis Joplin. Now, before I do this, just let me say, to save a lot of time and a lot of email later, I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything that Janis Joplin did. I'm not saying go be like Janis Joplin. But Janis Joplin did say this, and I think it's great. She said, don't compromise yourself. You're all you've got, baby. And so it's something that I've seen that we do again and again and again, that people compromise themselves. It's a compromise to say that you're not much, or you're not worthwhile, or you're not lovable, or you're not capable. The idea of sin, it's just an error. It's just a mistake. And an error can always be corrected. But the idea of sin, I don't like that, because sin calls for punishment. And error calls for correction. So I much prefer to say, you know, that was an error on my part. We can be mistaken. We can use the power of the mind against ourselves, and I certainly have. I don't know about you, but I certainly have. But mistakes, the point of a mistake is to recognize it so there can be the correction. That's all it's called for. Now, I think when Jesus talked about sin, he was referring to that very common human tendency to perceive without love. You know, it's an old idea of sin that if you did something bad, then it meant that therefore you were bad. Well, you know, consciousness has evolved over the centuries. And so when you make a mistake, okay, we get to recognize that because we all make mistakes. See, on the human level, we're not perfect. We believe in the perfection of the divinity that is within us, but the human part of us has a little bit of catching up to do. Now, if you were totally perfect in every dimension, there would be no need for you to be here. You would have not been born. So if you think you're your error, if you think you're the mistakes that you have been through, you're never going to grow beyond that, right? You and everyone will just keep affirming it and keep it in place. You know, with those thoughts and those statements of like, oh, I've made such mistakes in my life, I've made such bad choices, I've done some major things that were so wrong. Well, you think about that, about yourself, and you've got agreement. Because the universe just agrees with us. We live in a yes universe. So it's just going to agree with us. The universal subjective mind that we are immersed in just says, well, dear, interesting choice. If that's what you want to believe about yourself, then I guess we'll just get about the business of producing more of that for you. So this is not to deny that we make mistakes. Of course we do. We all do. But accepting our mistakes is how we grow and learn. It says in A Course in Miracles that all things are lessons of God. All things are lessons of God, and God would have me learn them. So that means what shows up and who shows up in my life are not by accident. So everything that calls up what I'm going to call today an unenlightened response, and you know what I mean here. Everything that happens in our life, whether it's people or situations, and our response is not the most enlightened response, that's supposed to happen, because that's how growth operates. See, the not best within us comes up for review, for us to have a chance to begin again, for us to choose in a different way. See, because if I say, I'm going to be loving today, I want to be a blessing to everywhere I go and to whoever I meet, then anything that stands between you and being that presence of a blessing, anything that stands between you and that has to come up. And I'm sorry, that's the bad news, but it's the truth. So if we try and live our life, you know, trying to be perfect for everyone so they will love us, then, well, I wonder about that, and I think, well, how are we going to grow? These things come up for us to look at, to learn from.